We believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Adam Winch here at Defenders USA. Hey, I'm going to be taking over for Laura tonight. She's off on some family stuff, and it's a good thing that she's doing that. So I'll be your host tonight, and though we missed Laura, it's good to be here. So anyways, we have a really good guest for you tonight. It's somebody who's become a friend of mine, a man I've come to admire, and I think he brings us something that's very important, both for sustainability and some other aspects of life. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Gabe New as we get into this. Hey, before we get started, I want to bring up a topic that's become kind of a passion of mine real quick. In the last year or so, I've started competing and shooting matches. And I think that is one of the best ways you can go out there and improve your skills. So I went this last Tuesday, I went to one of the steel challenges that I go to, and I got to shoot against some of the top shooters in the world. And usually I end up out of about 230 or so people. I usually end up somewhere about anywhere from like 15, 16, 18 down to about 50 or 60. It depends on the day and how well I do and all sorts of things. All right. If the better shooters bring their A game. And this week, as I shot on Tuesday, I got to shoot not directly with, but in one of the other squads against Kyle Schmidt. Now, Kyle Schmidt has been on this program, just an incredible shooter, a two-time Bianchi Cup champion, right? Think a world-class shooter, right? Or a world title winner, two-time champion. And I started out as an average shooter, right? A pretty decent shooter, but average for the competition world. And over time, the last year and a half, that competition stuff has helped me grow my own skills. Well, Kyle shot. And I think out of the 189 or 197 people that shot this weekend, I think he ended up somewhere about 16, 18, 19 out of the entire pack. Well, I ended up somewhere, I think, in the 40-ish range, but I felt pretty good on the mere fact that I was getting closer than usual to Kyle Schmidt. Also, there's somebody else there that I've been chasing for a long time, trying to beat them, and I think they just had a bad day because they ended up way below. Here's the point to this. You take somebody like me who's a decent to average to a decent shooter, and on occasion a good shooter. But by the mere fact I'm using competition as one of my training tools and going out there being willing to fail, I'm seeing my own skills increase. As a cop, I used to say all the time that competition will get you killed in the streets, right? You're going to die. And because it trains all the bad stuff, not the good stuff. And I've over time have come to the conclusion that a true defender of life, somebody who carries a gun defensive life, has to be a thinker. And if you can't learn to think on a competition range and learn to think slightly different in the competition of the defensive life, then you're not much of a thinker. So I would encourage you to go out, be willing to go to competitions, be willing to do what I did for the first 3, 4, 6 months of what I did, and just fail miserably. Go out there and just get your butt whooped, shooting against whoever it is you've got that you can go up against in different shooting competitions that are out there to grow your own skill. And I promise you, the people within that community are some of the best in the world. They have the greatest hearts. It's like a CrossFit community, right? Just great hearts out there. And I promise you, the other shooters that are far better than you want to help you grow. They want to teach you if you're open to it. They want to give you all sorts of tips and tricks, and they want to see you succeed just as much, if not even more than you do. And I've been so grateful. I've had some master shooters take me under their wing and go, hey, son, here's what you need to learn. And so it's become a real learning journey above and beyond the classes. And I'd recommend to you that if you have the chance between going to one class for a weekend versus maybe going to 5 or 6 competitions over the next couple months, go to the competition. You'll learn a ton there. And as we go into talking to Gabe New tonight, I'm going to bet he'll say the same thing about some other competitions you should engage in. So anyways, that's the challenge tonight. Go out, compete, be willing to be humbled. And I promise you, if you're a thinker, you'll begin to learn. All right. So tonight we've got Gabe New of Pujitsu, which he's got a YouTube channel. And he also has another company called Let me see. It's Eden. If I can find it, guys, I'm doing this by myself here. He has New Eden Farms. So these are ones you should look up on Facebook and YouTube, but that'll be Gabe New that's here. So let me tell you a little bit about Gabe. So I met Gabe at an ASP conference, or Active Self-Protection National Conference, 4 or 5 years ago. I happened to go there as a student, and he was there, and he was just intriguing. I kind of just watched the guy. And as I got to know him, I realized he's not only a kind spirit, but he's a very knowledgeable person. But anyways, here's the basic bio that we have on him. So Gabe New was born in Texas, but as a missionary, born in Texas, but he basically was raised in the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Zealand. And he spent most of his time as a missionary kid, which I understand because I grew up the same way. So because he spent so much time overseas, he oftentimes doesn't even almost feel American because he spent so much time there. Once back in the States, he's worked as a welder, a sandblaster, a painter, massage therapist, and that's something you're going to hear about tonight. I think that's so important. A farmer and a firearms trainer. He's currently working with the Palisade Training Group, which is a really solid group of trainers down in the Texas area. And he's working as an instructor and also as a part-time farmer and a stay-at-home dad. Gabe's passions are family, health, and how food impacts our health. And this is something I'm curious about. And of course, one of his other passions is freedom. I think you're going to see that quickly as we talk to him. And he wants people to understand the importance of their local community and the power of personal action. So Gabe and I got to spend time talking today for about, 45 minutes or an hour. And I was able to hear his passions come out. And I'm thinking you guys are going to learn a lot from this guy, and you're going to get the same sense of him as I do. Anyways, you can find him on social media on Facebook and YouTube at Pujitsu for combative contents, or New Eden Farms for his food growing audience. So without further ado, let's bring in Gabe New. Hey, Gabe.
Hey, Adam.
How you doing, brother? Good to talk to you too. Hey, thanks for coming tonight. I'm sorry you don't have Laura here, but she had important family things come up, so she's gone. So your host, brother, you're stuck with me.
No,
so,
I'm not stuck with you. I enjoy talking to you. And
well, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes. What's that?
Good for Laura for taking some family time.
Yeah, it's some cool stuff with her kiddos, so it's good for her to be away to do that. So, hey, I'm going to probably be taking some notes while we're talking here, and occasionally it'll look like I'm ignoring you because I'll probably be monitoring the comments. We've got a lot of comments coming in already, and I haven't had the time to look at them yet. But for folks, those of you watching, feel free to ask questions. Gabe is an expert in multiple areas here, so get his thoughts. Just feel free to throw it in there, and I will try to cull through these comments and the questions while also trying to talk to Gabe. So Gabe, so though I gave you a very tiny intro, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, basically, as you said, my parents were missionaries with Wycliffe. They were not actually translators, although that's what Wycliffe is. It's not a church planting group. They just went out, and my dad basically ended up either in administration in a couple of places, and then in the Philippines, he ended up functionally in PR because Wycliffe, like most translation specialists, they tend to be full of eggheads who were brilliant, but not that great with people. And so these translations would finally get finished, and it takes an average of 20, 25 years to get a translation done. So it would take, these people would spend their working career out in the field, and then almost nobody would get the Bible because they hadn't really interacted with all that many people and they hadn't promoted it. And
so I'm glad you jumped in and said the Bible, right? So for those who don't know, Wycliffe, right? It's a translation group that really translates the Bible to multiple languages, right? I grew up in the Ivory Coast, or West Africa, or Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa, right? And there were 64 village languages there besides the country's primary language, which was French. So though we knew French very well, right? That was our common language there, right? I was able to pick up smatterings of Jula, Bete, Abe, some other different village languages, and those oftentimes didn't have a Bible. So the Wycliffe missionaries that were in the Ivory Coast or other areas associated would be constantly translating the Bible in there. And imagine, like you said, 25 years. Imagine what it takes to translate into some of these very obscure languages that might only be spoken by 8,000 or 10,000 people across the world. How hard that would be phonetically to translate the Bible correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we used to go to the Wycliffe compounds occasionally to go to their libraries because they had the best libraries in the country. And anytime we wanted to read a good American book or something in English, we'd go to Wycliffe, and borrow from the library and forget to take it back. It was pretty cool. Little theft going on the mission field. So, okay, so where did you start growing up overseas? Because I want to know how formative that was for you, because I know for me that was extremely formative. How was that going overseas? What age and where'd you go?
So at about 7 years old, we went to Papua New Guinea, and that to me felt pretty primitive. For my parents, it was what they called jungle camp training. It was where they go to basically get new missionaries used to being in the field in a totally different culture, so that when they go wherever they're permanently stationed, they don't make a lot of the cultural faux pas that we Americans are so prone to make. And so we spent basically 6 months in the camp, learning how to live amongst people. And then we spent 6 months out in a village, living literally in a thatched roof hut that was raised up off the ground, and no electricity, no running water. I'm sure that for my parents, it was pretty rough, especially my mother. But as a 7-year-old boy, I thought it was awesome.
As a kid, that was great. One place we lived in Africa, we were there without electricity or running water for a year and a half. And I think that was one of the coolest, most formative things in the world. I mean, I hated it as a kid, trucking that water every day from where you got the water in 5-gallon buckets on both sides, right? But I talk about formative. So, okay, so did you pick up the language there? And is that where you guys went to language school for translation?
I didn't. That language was generically Pidgin English, and I might have picked up a tiny bit of it, but I didn't really need to, and I didn't. From there, we only spent a year, and then we came back to the United States for about a year to raise support. And once we had that, he was stationed in New Zealand. Not a hardship post at all.
No,
that was quite lovely. It was good. It was another one of those culture breaking experiences for me that made me just feel less and less. I remember going and being mocked mercilessly for my accent. And I think I did have a pretty deep East Texas accent when we first moved there. But we spent a year there, and then again came back to the States for a little while, and then got sent off to the Philippines, where we stayed for 4 years. And during that 4 years, I didn't come back. My parents and a couple of my siblings did, but I stayed in the Philippines for the full 4 years.
And is that where you started picking up other languages?
Yeah, I picked up some. My brother picked up a lot more. He was a little bit older and allowed to run around. I was not allowed to run wild, which in hindsight was probably the better decision, but it did feel constricting at the time. But
okay,
for good or ill, we spent a lot of time on base, or I would, almost everybody there was bilingual to some extent, and they spoke enough English that it didn't force me to get too deep. And so I did not pick up as much as I, in retrospect, would have liked.
Okay, so you said a compound, right? The where I was at in Côte d'Ivoire, they had a compound they stayed on. Did you guys have the same type of thing?
Yes. Yeah, and
Okay.
we would spend some time there, maybe 1 month out of the year on average, just for, basically housekeeping duties of dealing with all the things that missionaries have to do, that you have to do just to keep in touch with everybody.
So what language were your parents proficient or fluent in for translation to other languages?
So the main trade language was, I just had a vapor lock there. The language that they were working in where we were stationed was Ibanag, and that was a fairly major language. It was not the major language of like the national language, but it was a fairly large people group.
Okay. So once done with the Philippines, you said you're there for 4 years. Where'd you go next?
We moved back to Texas, to Conroe, just north of Houston, and I was late 14, so we came back, and I was in shock. was nothing like what I was used to, and I just had a hard time relating. I don't think I ever really fully recovered from that. I saw somebody give the example of, if you start out as American, let's say you're fully blue and you move to another country and that country is yellow, that rubs off on you. And so you end up as green but you'll never be fully yellow, but you can never go back to being fully blue either. So you can kind of understand both cultures to some extent, but you're also kind of the man without a country to some extent.
I know that so well. I remember
it can feel awkward.
I remember coming back to the States and being laughed at because I didn't know what an Atari was, right? And I didn't know what tube stocks were, and I had no idea this or no idea that. And and then over there you get laughed at because you're too American, you're too this, you're too that. It's kind of in both worlds. It didn't matter what you did, you couldn't win.
Yeah.
So
and even as a dirt poor missionary, you were considered rich, weren't you?
Oh yeah, over there.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about absolutely dirt poor. So good job. Okay. So from there, right? Where'd you go? What ended up, right? It sounded like you probably homeschooled the same way I did, right? But once you came to the States, did you go into regular schools or what'd you do?
So yeah, when we first moved back, I was able to take, in 8th grade, I went to a private Christian school, and then I homeschooled 9th through 12th. And I then went and took a semester of college, just general courses. Couldn't decide what I wanted to do, so I quit. And I had actually taken some college courses in high school as well. And so I got some college credits. Still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and so had to go to work. But and that was when I became a welder, and went from there to sandblasting and painting. It was, I really enjoy the skills, but it's not something I wanted to do. And it really helped me later in life when I started making holsters, just with the creative ability and the ability to make things. But really did not love that, and struggled with my health. Was having problems with. I didn't know it at the time. Didn't know it for many years. It was a problem with gluten. I'm celiac. And so that ended up combining with some other stuff to give me leaky gut. And years down the road, I then developed Hashimoto's from that. But basically, having health trouble motivated me to become a farmer in order to grow healthy food. And so I think, well, somewhere in the middle, I took up massage therapy, trying to make some money. And while I had some back problems from welding, and sorry, let me mute that. Had some back problems and started working on friends because most guys who work, all of us have tight shoulders, and went to massage school. Really liked it, but I didn't like doing it as a business. That was also not my thing. Massage tends to be something that ladies get to relax, and I just don't. I don't want to work on a bunch of ladies. No offense. Happy to work on people who are still wearing all their clothes and help them, but decided I'd rather farm. So here we are.
So all the tightness of all the construction work you did, which I found the same thing on missionary kids. It seems like the vast majority of missionary kids, and sorry to the audience if we're going into something that bores you here, but I found the most part missionary kids, we came back and we kind of bounced around a bit, not sure what to do. And I think it was because we're floating between two cultures all the time. And, if you're not going to go into the mission field or into the ministry of some type, that's what you've grown up around. It leaves you kind of not sure where to go in life. So once you moved into construction, right, typical missionary route that seems to be there, is that what led you into massage school? Is all the pain and the tightness and everything that was there?
Yeah, and it's really very, very common for massage therapists to get into massage because they themselves have problems. And let me just go back and touch on the bouncing around thing. That's something that if you haven't been kind of run through the production mill of a regular school, you're much more comfortable just bouncing around.
Yes.
I've never been comfortable working in an office or anything like that. Having to do a little bit of that, it just feels very constricting. Working a 9 to 5, and I just hate that. I'd far rather work 60 hours a week and have the freedom to pick when those 60 hours are than work for somebody else at 40 hours a week.
Yeah, the constant
doesn't make sense if you've never done it.
Yeah, exactly. The constant predictiveness of a job was so entrapping to me that it was hard to settle down. As a cop, I did end up living in one place for about 20 years and doing about the same job, 2 jobs for about 10 years apiece. I'll tell you that was the most settled time in my life, and I think it really came from the upbringing of bouncing all over the world and going to different things and constantly living on a fast pace of up and down in the missionary world, much like the police world, just very much highs and lows and ebbs and flows that were very fast and very dramatic. So, okay. So from there, did you take the massage thing? Did you turn it into a business for a while, or how did that go?
Only a very short while. I just immediately realized that while I loved doing it, it was not something that I was going to be, if I went to work for somebody else, it was going to be that 9 to 5 grind. And it was very difficult to find something that was more therapy focused and not simply pleasure focused, just relaxation, the typical Swedish, make me feel good and let me go to sleep on the table sort of thing. And that just doesn't interest me. I want to fix people. I want to help them feel better, not just in the moment, but for the future.
And a bunch of construction dudes don't just go seek massage therapy to help them.
No, they don't.
Not gonna.
You talk about touch reverse. Oh boy.
Okay, so this is something that we're at the ASP conference several times. You've come up, or even at the national conference for AGAG, a Girl in a Gun, just a couple of weeks ago. There, you came up behind me and just started giving me the world's greatest massage in the world. I got to ask you, right? I get, because of all the dry fire training, the shooting I do. Even though I try to do stretches and all to really work on some of this stuff, can you talk to us a little bit about how much maybe this is needed, or you think the benefit to it? Because I find in my dry fire, it's not natural for the human to go so explosively to the gun and back out many times over, right? Or the hard movements. The body's not made for that. And when we do it too much, it can cause some injuries. Can you talk about that, and then how maybe a good focus massage or things we could do that would help us in our dry fire training? Because that's a lot of repetitions, and I'm starting to really feel it up here, except for when you're around.
So there's a couple of tools that you can basically play with. One of them is called a Thera cane, as in a therapy cane. And that may be a brand name, but if you look that up, you'll find it. It's basically, it looks like a shepherd's crook, and it's got a couple of handles, and you grab those handles and you can kind of reach over and drive into your own shoulders, and give yourself a little bit of a back rub. And if you're really dedicated, you can, if you do that 5 times a day, believe it or not, just kind of spread those out, very short, little sessions, not long at all, but do it 5 times a day. You can really begin to see some progress.
Okay, so you call it a back rub. Is it really getting into the muscle and the what's it called, the fascia on the muscle? Is it breaking that down? Is that what's helpful, or is it just really a back rub?
So it depends on how you do it. If you do it fast and light, just it's just like doing this, the Mr. Miyagi hand sort of thing. Whereas if you want, you can really just bear down into that and make yourself, take some deep breaths, because you can really bring some pain. And that's why you keep those sessions very short, but do it frequently to kind of promote the blood flow. And my left shoulder, I had a big knot that was, it was really problematic. And I went to work on that thing 5-6 times a day, and it took me 2 months. That was some serious dedication. It hurt. And for most of those 2 months, it felt like I was making zero progress, and I just kept doing it. And one day I'd gotten intimately familiar with this one particular huge knot. And so I went on that knot and I started pressing, and I thought it slipped off. I thought that's weird. And I started feeling around for it. I realized, holy cow, it just disappeared. It gave up. And I kid you not, I almost cried because that pain eased up. And it takes a lot of dedication. I mean, because you're going to go through weeks and weeks and weeks of no progress, and you'll think, man, why am I still doing this? But if you stick with it, things get better, and they often get better just like that.
So would you explain this? Because maybe I misunderstand. Here's my understanding, is that the muscles have a plaque on it, right? Like what you see on chicken. It's almost like a plaque, a membrane that's on there that helps keep the muscles contracted and the muscles bind up. And if you don't break that plaque down through some type of, like you're talking, rubbing, pressure, other things, to ultimately break it down to where the muscle can expand, it bundles up and begins to hurt. And for that reason, I know for me, I'll use like tennis balls. And then when I want to really get deep, like a lacrosse ball. And if I really want to get deep, like a baseball or even a golf ball, to really dig into certain areas. Am I right in this? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're pretty much right.
Okay, so finding different ways and applying different amounts of pressure that you can ultimately over time take more and more and more softens the plaque around the muscles, breaking that plaque called fascia, breaking that off to where the muscle becomes more pliable. You can stretch, expand, and all that more. Is that
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So what about this in the dry fire movements? What are the ones that if they do too often that you think can be dangerous or over time build towards injury?
Well, anything done to excess will do that. And the shortest answer I could give you is just don't do anything. Do it a little bit. Far better. I'd far rather see you dry fire twice a day for just a couple minutes than have one big session. I mean, not only is that more beneficial for your skill acquisition, you're less likely to develop any sort of repetitive strain on that.
Yeah, because dry fire skill builds over really not so much volume, but consistency. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So from there, you've moved into Jiu-Jitsu, right? You have your YouTube channel that really deals, from what I understand, combatives. And my understanding is you're doing Jiu-Jitsu and maybe a few other things. Can you talk about that? And would you give us kind of the here's my issue. Too many of us in the gun world focus on the gun, where to me the gun is really the last absolute resort, right? There's been several times I have had to fight my way to the gun, and that was more important than the gun in the moment. So would you talk about your combatives and what you think needs to be a focus for those of us in the gun world?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I think that being comfortable with some hand-to-hand skills is crucial. There have been some times that I feel like I was able to be a better human to, as Craig Douglas would say, the unknown contacts. Managing these people with some humanity still is not only is it really good for avoiding fights. They were able to get a little closer than I might have let them if I'd had no skills, because I would have been really uncomfortable. But knowing that I can handle myself both grappling and striking wise just gave me that level of confidence to not worry about it. And of course, displaying a high level of confidence, real confidence, not false bravado, is also a great way to make sure that fights don't even start. But like you said, the last thing I want to do is use a gun. Man, talk about an expensive prospect, and that will end up doing the exact thing that I don't want to do, because my family will be harmed by that. Even if I'm found completely innocent, it's going to be expensive, right? And there's always the prospect that I can get sued civilly, or that I can get doxxed. I might have to move and functionally go into hiding. This is just not something I want to do. So
Right. The best fight you'll ever get yourself into is the one you avoid in the first place. So, okay. So you're kind of a ninja. What do you do? What kind of combatives do you do?
So my dad put us in karate, in Shotokan karate, when we were in the Philippines. That was kind of a big thing over there, and I'm glad he did it. I will tell you that it was basically useless,
Yes.
except that it got me interested in the martial arts.
Yeah.
And yeah, I came back, and I have average to large genetics, and one of my best friends was a guy who was quite a bit smaller than me, both in height and weight. And, we were both, the Bruce Lee nerds of the school. And so we would spar. And the first few times we sparred, man, he hit me just as much as I hit him. And I realized, wow, all this karate stuff I'm doing is a complete waste of time. Not only that, it's worse because it's so inefficient. And so that's when everything changed. But so I do tell people when they ask, yes, I've done some karate. It's a little bit like having an NRA certification. People who don't know anything think that's awesome. So
right.
But
Totally useless.
Yeah, pretty much. So I got to train with lots of different people over the years, and if I had to settle on one, I did some boxing. I did some Jeet Kune Do with Ted Wong, who was one of 3 people certified by Bruce Lee to teach. And he was, he would tell you, no, I'm not teaching you how to fight. I'm just passing on what Bruce was teaching at the end of his life. He was the final person certified to teach. It doesn't look anything like what most of the Jeet Kune Do out there looks like. I would, be the first to tell you that most of the Jeet Kune Do out there is very, very.
It's a show.
It's a show. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. But Ted was very impressive. Ted was small. He was your typical Chinese immigrant, very slight stature, slender, and he moved like the wind, just super efficient. He was like a fencer without the blade, just fast and efficient. And that heavily influenced my striking, and then jiu-jitsu for the grappling portion of that. And not the Brazilian jiu-jitsu that's very popular today, although it's great for what it is, but you do need to know how to fight on the ground. But excuse me, there's also a lot of stand-up grappling that I think is very realistic. And grappling is grappling, whether you're on the ground or not.
Okay, so let's say for Grandma Good Cookies, right?
Go ahead.
What's that? So let's say for Grandma Good Cookies, right? She's not the ninja you are, right? Maybe not as strong as you, and maybe a little bit older. What do you recommend for them for some type of defensive training? If you were to describe a program for them to look into and start doing, what would be helpful to them?
Almost any program that will pressure test its moves in some sort of real thing, just like you talked about competition shooting being valuable, competing against another person in some sort of real form. I just kind of complained about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because, so many of these sports schools are like, here's 17 different ways to pull guard, when that's a really bad idea on the street, right? You don't want to immediately go to your back on the street. But at the same time, it's a little bit like being in a pressure cooker. You have somebody who's actively resisting you, trying to defeat you, and you can do those moves at close to full power without being hurt or hurting your partner. That's incredibly valuable. So I like grappling for that aspect, but for grandma and most people, I actually carry OC spray all the time because I don't want to go hands-on. Just because I can doesn't mean I want to.
What do you carry? Palm, saber? What do you carry?
Yeah, palm.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So for those of you who don't know what that means, that's POM. It's an acronym, stands for peace of mind. I just call it pure honorary mess, right? It's nasty stuff. It's more powerful than what I carried as a cop. And a little bitty clip of that is a good idea. So palm's what you carry. All right. And
Yeah.
where do you carry that? Do you carry it right pocket, left pocket, on your belt? How do you carry it?
I carry it in my right pocket.
Okay. So I tend to carry mine on my left, but I've heard arguments either way. So, all right. So, so you're talking about striking, right? You don't want to get into that. I know for me, I've hit a lot of people. I've been in a lot of fights, and I find for the most part the hittings usually don't work. And I'm a decently strong dude. Hittings oftentimes don't work because usually your bad guy or the people you're fighting with are just as hyped up on adrenal rush as you are. So therefore, they don't even really feel the impact unless you literally hit them on the button or something that knocks them out. It usually doesn't have an effect. So sounds to me like the grappling I found on the street that worked better for me too. So for somebody who's not as strong, you still think the jiu-jitsu style type grappling?
Yes, and it's simply because, with striking and stuff. I mean, if you train in jiu-jitsu, you can always add the eye gouges and the cheap shots, right?
Mhm.
That so many of these people talk about with their special sauce ninja techniques. You can always add those in the moment. But one thing you can't do with most of your striking arts is you can't practice anywhere close to full power because rule number one, don't break your toys, right?
Right.
Your partner can't sustain that, and you can't have them, have it done to you and continue practicing realistically. So the ability to practice whatever technique it is, even if it's a little suboptimal, being able to get really good at that is just incredibly valuable.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, but really, I would tell somebody, go take one of the managing unknown contacts classes. They will work with you on your infirmities. They will not push you past those. And being aware and kind of having some verbal skills. The verbal judo is very important.
Yes,
You
very
just
important.
deflect, catch people before they're right up on you, ideally. I mean, you can't always avoid stuff, but as a general rule, if you're alert and can kind of stop them getting in close, you're just going to be much better off.
So it sounds like we're on the same page, right? Take some good situational awareness type of classes or that type. You said managing unknown contacts. For those you don't know, I'm presuming you're referring to Craig Douglas.
Yes.
Are there any others you'd suggest they go talk to, spend time with?
Anybody in the ShivWorks collective.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anybody else teaching anything specifically, kind of in that vein that I've vetted personally. So.
Okay. So for those you don't know, ShivWorks, Craig Douglas, go look at that type of thing. All right. So you've moved into something that I found is very interesting. You're down on that farm down in the Texas area here, and you've moved into growing a lot of your own food, to sustainability of things. I have a odd suspicion that we're going to get to soon, possibly, that we're going to get to where we're going to have to kind of take care of ourselves a little bit more than what the grocery store currently supplies right now, right? Things may become a bit more scarce. The more we can prepare for that. So this seems to be one of your passions, and it's something that I've been wanting to talk to you about for others for a long time. You grow a lot of your own stuff. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, and I should say I try. Some years it's better than others, but that's what gardening is all about. I got into gardening because I was struggling with my health, and I was kind of in between jobs, and I thought, why not, grow a lot of food and help supply the family while I think about what career is next. And I found I just really loved it. There's a joy to being in nature. People often like to hunt. They say they love to go out in nature just as much as they like the actual hunting. Well, gardening affords you pretty much the same thing. Just seeing the joy of creation there, the inner workings, seeing all the little details that most people never see. And not only that, the food is amazing. You literally cannot buy food as good as you can grow it.
At the grocery stores.
I'm sorry?
At the grocery stores, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't care where you go. You're not going to find it, because grocery stores have to buy food that is commercially grown. Usually it's picked early if it's a fruit or something, because if it's picked ripe, it's already soft and it can't be shipped. So it hasn't had time to develop the full flavor and nutrition that, you're going to have if you just go pick it straight off the vine or tree. And even just the vegetables, the vegetables that I thought I hated, things like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and squash. Oh, come on. Who would like those things?
Exactly.
When you grow them, obviously there's the pride of having grown it yourself, but also the freshness and quality. It has to be tasted to be believed.
It's kind of like bananas, right? As a kid in Africa, right? We had bananas right there off the tree. And I ate bananas. I come to the States and I eat bananas in the States, and they taste like sawdust compared to stuff overseas. So I'm kind of figuring it's the same thing with food you grow. It's got much more than nutrition, the flavor, the sweetness, or whatever it is in there.
Yes.
Okay. So how did you get started in that? Because I think this is something that a lot of us need to look into, just like we should be looking into better investments, right? Better equipment for our guns, better growing our own family, tightening up our relationships with the Lord if you ascribe to that, right? Same thing here. You've got to start somewhere. We should do this. This part about being a defender. Where do people start?
Somebody said, I don't remember who it was. They said, think big, start small, don't quit. So starting small is, I think, the key. It's really easy to get overwhelmed because even just a fairly small garden, it's functionally a new career that you starting out don't know anything about. We laugh at kids who don't know where eggs come from and think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
It does, doesn't it?
But the reality is most adults also don't really know how to produce food. So maybe we think we do, but unless you've grown up on a farm and have actually done it, you don't know as much as you think. And so there's a lot of little intricacies. It's not, I like to say it's not rocket surgery, but there is a lot more to it than, you just throw some seeds in the ground, water it, and hey presto, that you're going to have a harvest.
Did you just mix your metaphors? Rocket surgery? Okay.
Yes,
all right.
I'm sorry. I do that on purpose. At least I tell people that. So,
okay.
Let me pull up my quick little cheat sheet here. There are some principles that I'm going to give you for basically how to imitate nature.
Take notes, people. Take notes. I'm going to take notes.
I didn't develop these. This was the regenerative ag people. Might be understanding ag. Gabe Brown is the guy I heard it from, and he's a great resource. Let me give you the rundown on resources real quick. Gabe Brown, Ray Archuleta, Alan Williams, Mark Shepard, and the Permaculture Orchard guy on YouTube. Stefan somebody, he's French Canadian. I won't do him the dishonor of butchering his last name.
Hey, I lived in French Canada. Come on, leave us alone.
So to imitate nature, there's 6 guidelines. Always keep the soil covered. In nature, where do you see the soil uncovered for any length of time? Only in a desert, right?
Right.
The soil is constantly uncovered. That's what we call a desert. So always keep the soil covered. Now, living plants are one way, and the other way is mulch. Just do whatever works for you. If you're thinking about starting a garden in the future, probably the easiest thing to do is just cover that spotted mulch and let it decompose. That's a fantastic way to start. It will begin to feed the soil, and of course, it kills off any competing sod. Veggies don't like perennial grasses, so that's a great way to start. Just cover it in mulch and let it sit.
Mulch from the store or mulch from Sam Nursery?
Mulch, you can sign up with chipdrop.com, and
Chipdrop.
if you're in luck, they will, local arborists and electric clearing crews will just drop a load of wood chips at your house. Literally any organic matter, just leave it on top of the soil and let it decompose. The microbiota will begin to decompose that over time, and that's what you want.
How long over time?
Well, it depends on what it is. If it's something like hay, which can be a little risky because you're bringing in grass seed and possible weed seed, and certain things like Bermuda and Johnson grass, man, this stuff is just pernicious. You'll never get rid of it. Or straw, which doesn't have the fertility that hay does, because straw is just the stalk of the plant. All the nutrition went into the grain, which was harvested off. But on the other side, at least you don't have any weed seed. But there's less there for the soil to eat. That stuff decomposes a lot faster. If you bring in on the far end of the spectrum, it would be sawdust, right? Super high carbon, gonna take a long time to decompose, and the last thing you want to do is till that in, because it'll tie up all the nitrogen. And
so just on top.
Yeah, like you can put sawdust in your paths, and it'll tie up all the nitrogen on the top, and it will eventually decompose. Makes great paths, but you don't want to put that in your growing area because it's just too high in carbon.
Okay, so are we still at the first one to just keep the soil covered?
I'm still on number one. Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just checking. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
No, you got to my passion point now. So that was number one, keep soil covered. Number two is minimize tillage. Disturb the soil as little as possible. Understand that the soil, I like to think of the soil as a living organism. Really, it's billions of them, right? It's microbes, it's fungus, it's earthworms, it's all those things and so much more. When you go and you till it, even just a little bit, some tillage is kind of unavoidable. You go to put a plant in the ground or a seed, you're doing a tiny bit of tillage, but every time you till, you're injecting oxygen, and that is essentially a bacterial promoting event, which kind of counterbalances what you want. You want to have a 1-to-1 ratio of fungus and bacteria, and croplands are basically highly bacterial. There's no fungus left. It's the fungus, it's the mycorrhizal fungi that interact with the roots of whatever you've got growing there, and those mycorrhizal fungi are so much better at harvesting the minerals and nutrition and trading it with the plants. The plants harvest solar energy, and they exude root sugars to feed the soil life. The soil life in turn takes those root sugars and gives up minerals and other nutrition for the plants. It's actually very cooperative. I think in grade school I learned that nature was very competitive, and there's certainly some competition, but it is far more cooperative than it is competitive. And so we want to keep a balance, and we just don't want to disturb that if possible. So if you have super hard soil to begin with and you don't have much to start, go ahead and till, put everything in you can, because you're not really hurting anything. There's nothing there to start. But once you've got that soil covered, try not to disturb it anymore and just let it be.
Okay, so here in hard-packed Arizona, that's the best way to go. Till it up, put the stuff in, cover it up.
Start by breaking it up, whether that's tillage or taking a broad fork or something like that, and breaking it up, loosening it so the roots can get down, and then try not to do it again unless you.
Okay. So what's number three?
Number three is diversity. When you look at nature, you don't see a lot of monoculture. You see all sorts of grasses, forbs, legumes, root crops. They're all growing together, right? And so in hard times, they actually work together. You'll see a diverse crop perform better in hard times than a monoculture. It will produce more in total. And I can't tell you exactly why. I just know that's the way it works.
Isn't that almost biblical, right? Oftentimes the the heat of what you're going through brings out the best results, right? Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I'll rabbit trail slightly and say that the organic methods, regenerative methods now, as it's commonly called, they tend to do about as well as the well-managed conventional. And I hate calling it conventional because it's such a new, it's the last 100 years that we've been doing that. The conventional farming, they perform about the same in a good year. It's in a bad year that all of a sudden the regenerative continues to do well, and you have crop failures. Yeah, because you've built up your bank account, you've invested, like you said earlier. Investing is so important. You're investing in the soil. And it takes about 3 years to really, if you're doing it right, to really get that built up where everything is kind of working together and things start to take off.
Isn't God's creation magnificent?
But and I will rabbit trail off my rabbit trail and say that talk about greenwashing. The term organic. If you go to buy organic in the store, you're probably buying junk because
really?
That has been co-opted. The big guys make the rules. They define what is and is not acceptable. And one of those rules is you're not allowed to use the various insecticides, pesticides, fungicides, etc., unless you're at risk of losing your crop.
And they're always at risk of losing their crop.
Well, maybe.
Perpetually.
One of those things that, intervention begets intervention. So the more you've killed stuff, the less life there is in the soil, and then the more you're going to have to intervene next time. So it takes patience. And when you're a commercial farmer, I totally sympathize. I'm not criticizing them for their decisions, but we all have to make a living. But it's very tempting to just constantly intervene. Ooh, I got a pest problem. I better spray some poison. Well, you're not just killing the good stuff, right? It's like taking antibiotics. It's wise for you to take an antibiotic if you're on the verge of death. You don't want to die, just to be a purist. But if you do, you've just upset your stomach by killing off everything, right? It didn't just kill the bad stuff. It killed the good stuff too. Now you've got to start eating probiotics, some good sauerkraut and stuff like that to kind of rebuild that. And it takes time. If anybody's ever taken on antibiotics, they can tell you that, man, things were not happy there for a while, right?
Yeah.
During and after. So the same thing happens to your soil.
Okay, right. Let's move to number 4.
Number 4, growing plant roots as long as possible, because all the sunlight coming down is energy. You want to harvest that energy. The plant will take it, convert it into root sugars, pump that out, and that is how you are growing your organic matter. Up to 50% of the organic matter in the soil is being built by microbes that have fed off of those root sugars and then died. So cover crops, it's an older technology to think that cover crops are building organic matter in the soil by growing them and then turning them under, because now you've got all that mass under the soil. The problem is the tillage is injecting oxygen. It decomposes it fast. So you're seeing some growth. You're seeing a little bit of improvement. It kind of gets up to a point and then it just stops.
So hold on. So what do you mean by grow the plant roots as long as possible and, overgrowth or whatever? What do you mean?
So the plants are harvesting solar energy, right? If we don't have plants growing there, any sunlight falling on that space is essentially wasted energy. You don't want to have a bunch of bare space. You want to put something in there to harvest that sunlight. So let's say you have a squash plant, a summer squash plant, and then roughly 3 feet away you've got another summer squash plant. Well, if you can put a little something in the middle that wouldn't compete with those two,
I see.
Maybe some bush beans, because those will grow and you can even harvest them. Or even if you...
So you're saying it kind of covers it, giving it a little bit of shade? Am I off here?
Well, it's not only giving it shade, it's capturing that solar energy, and the plant then uses that energy to push out root sugars to trade the soil life for its nutrition. Soil life has the ability, if you're not screwing with it with conventional fertilizers, which are salt based, and it kills off all the soil life. If you've got the soil life, the plants will be able to extract whatever's available. Not every soil is complete, so it won't necessarily be able to get everything it needs, but it can get the vast majority of what it needs, both from the air and from trading. There's an active market underground of trading. Hey, I've got root sugars for you, and in turn, you're going to give me minerals, right? So you want to capitalize on that as much as possible.
Okay, makes sense.
Number 5, integrate livestock wherever possible. That can be chickens, rabbits, whatever. Maybe you don't have livestock. Maybe you live in town and you can't have any livestock at all. Find a way to bring in some livestock manure, compost it, spread that on the soil. Not quite as ideal as having livestock on the soil, literally, but still very good and critical. Because again, anytime you see life out in nature, you see animals. So
you're saying don't worry about the fact that things might be growing and whatever livestock's there might try to eat it. You're just saying No,
I'm not saying you have to put a cow in your vegetable garden. I'm saying that animals are a critical, integral part of nature.
Okay.
And despite what vegans and vegetarians want you to believe, they are critical to the health of the soil. There's no faster way to build soil than to rotate animals. Envision, a vast herd of buffalo, sweeping across the plains, right? They sweep across. It's like a locust, right? They just eat everything because there's so many of them. They're moving constantly because there's predators on the backside trying to pick them off, and the grass in front of them, is going to get eaten by somebody else. So they get up there and they eat. It's just this constant movement. They poop, they pee, they trample, they go on, and they don't come back for quite a while. And that rest time then is what allows everything to recover, and that it just begins that cycle again. That's the fastest way to build soil.
So just like a forest fire is needed for the forest, these are needed for the soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What's number 6?
Number 6, remember your context. Everybody's context is different. If you're in the desert, you have it far different from somebody in Florida who's very wet, even though you're both very hot. There are also dry deserts. And so context is also your resources, whether it's financial or energy, neighbors, your knowledge, everything. So just because I do things a certain way doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. If you're working a ton and I'm working part-time, then I've got a lot more time to spend in my garden, and you're going to have to manage yours differently. You're probably going to grow different crops that are much lower maintenance. So last one is context.
So for, say, the garden curious, right? The own growth food curious, a good place to start. Let's say maybe they don't have a lot of place, a lot of property. They don't have much outside, or maybe their climate's not the greatest for it. Can you grow stuff inside, say in your apartment, whatever else, tomatoes, things like that? Where would you start?
I would start by going to Google and saying, hey, what grows well in my area? And just kind of go down the rabbit trail, find out, what do you like? I mean, because I hate tomatoes. I hate tomatoes. I try to grow them for my wife, but honestly, I never do well because I just hate them. And so don't grow something you don't like and aren't going to eat. Black-eyed peas grow well here, but none of us like them. So I just don't grow them. I focus on what I like, but I also find what grows well. I could theoretically grow lemons and limes, but I really have to take care of them because our winters are a little too cold. So it doesn't make sense for me to do that just because I can. Do what's easy and do what you like, and then expand from there.
So we have less than a minute left. We might go a little bit longer, but can you help, as we talked about this earlier, can you help tie this into more of the global picture, right? I see this as a necessity, as something we should start doing more of. Shucks, even if it's growing your own tomatoes, because Gabe loves tomatoes, right? Even if it's just growing your spices in your kitchen, whatever it is, can you tie this into, as we talked about, the necessity of this as we look at the larger global things that are happening?
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot of dark clouds on the horizon. I really hope they don't materialize, but I think they are more likely to. I think we're going the way of Argentina. Times are going to be tough, even if we don't have a civil war and a massive economic collapse. We thought that in the 1940s, things were so much better, we would now have to eat twice the meat, 3 times the fruit, and 4 times the amount of vegetables to get the same amount of minerals and trace elements that they got in the 40s. Is that shocking or what?
Because it was much more homegrown, local grown food, wasn't it?
It's all because we're killing our soils, and we've ruined their ability to trade with soil life to get those nutrients. And so it shows up in our health. We're eating empty calories, and that's why we have a nation of obesity. So, you got to do it yourself, unfortunately. And it's a community thing. If you don't garden, go find a local gardener and pay them what they're asking. I know that's hard because you're abandoning a system that is promoting cheap food and making it cheaper. At least it appears cheaper because it's subsidized. They're taking your money and spending it elsewhere. So it's difficult, but start by supporting your local community. And then if you can, grow your own. So
that's a really good thought, right? Go to somebody who's actually doing it until you grow your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are past the hour. We do have to close. Gabe, I got to tell you, I'd like to get you back here if Laurel agrees, right? She's probably going to fire us both, but at least me. But I'd love to get you back. I think there's so many things here we didn't get to that people need to hear. I desperately want to learn because, boy, we got to get beyond the gun. We got to get beyond certain things, and one of is our own food security, and I think that ties so deeply into our health. So, anyways, thank you for your time tonight. I hope you're willing to come back, and if you'll stay in the green room, I'll go ahead and cut us off here for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening tonight. Remember, you can find us on all sorts of different platforms. I don't know all the stuff Laura does, but Spotify, all that stuff. But thank you so much for listening to this. And if you get the chance, check out Gabe New. He's got a YouTube channel. Go look him up there at Jiu-Jitsu and New Eden Farms. Become a subscriber. I'll bet you'll learn. I've picked up a few things myself there. So go learn from Gabe. Anyways, have a good night.